The rain over Seabright City was not just water. It was a cold, liquid shroud. It fell in sheets, blurring the edges of the world, turning the private tarmac of Sky Harbor East into a slick, dark mirror reflecting the flickering blue landing lights. A fine frost clung to the metal skeletons of the service gantries, a salty bite in the air that promised a bitter flight. Cassian Vale stood at the base of the air stairs, the collar of his bespoke coat turned up against the wind. He was the head of the Vale Consortium, a man who had spent a decade dragging his family's name from the gutters of organized crime into the polished boardrooms of legitimate enterprise. Tonight, the Aegis 9, his flagship private jet, waited sleek and powerful, ready to carry him to New Avalon. A multi-billion-dollar investment deal with Fort Meridian hung in the balance, the final piece of his puzzle of legitimacy. His security detail, led by his right hand, Modric Poe, formed a tight, silent crescent around him. The wet tarmac hissed under their heavy boots. As Cassian placed a polished Italian leather shoe on the first metal step, a movement in his peripheral vision broke the sterile, controlled scene. A young janitor, almost swallowed by a faded, silver-reflective vest, was silently rolling a heavy trash cart near the tail of the aircraft. She moved with a quiet economy of motion, just another shadow in the downpour, her head down. But as Cassian drew level with the massive wing, she deviated from her path. She did not stop, but her route intersected his. His guards tensed, hands moving instinctively under their jackets. The woman, Maria Ortiz, did not look at them. She looked only at the ground, pushing her cart until she was almost past him. Then, just as she passed his shoulder, she lifted her head slightly. Her voice was so low it was almost stolen by the wind, yet it cut through the engine's low whine with the precision of a scalpel. "Don't trust your pilot." Two of his men were on her in an instant, hands gripping her thin arms, lifting her off her feet. She did not flinch, did not cry out, her worn boots dangling inches above the pavement. Cassian raised a single ungloved hand. "Stop." The men froze, their grip still punishing, but they did not move further. Cassian turned, stepping down from the stairs to face her. The rain plastered dark strands of hair to her face, but it could not wash away the look in her eyes. He had expected fear, perhaps the wild-eyed panic of a fanatic or the desperation of someone seeking attention. He saw neither. Her eyes, dark and deep, were utterly, dangerously calm. It was the stillness of someone who had seen the worst and was unimpressed by the prelude to a storm. "What did you say?" Cassian's voice was low, a rumble of controlled power that usually made grown men tremble. Maria Ortiz did not try to pull away from the guards. She simply extended her left hand, which clutched a damp, gray cleaning rag. The chemical sting of aircraft solvent cut through the clean smell of the rain. "Ethel Mercaptan," she whispered, her voice rough, forcing the words out against the grip on her arms. "The ratio is wrong. They use it to scent the jet fuel, so you can smell a leak." She looked toward the cockpit, then back to him, her gaze unwavering. "There is no leak, but they wanted you to smell one. The real leak, the one you cannot smell, has been faked, fabricated." Cassian's gaze automatically shifted upward toward the illuminated cockpit, where the silhouette of his pilot was visible. Holden Cade, a man with a perfect record, flawless credentials, and the kind of blandly handsome face that inspired confidence in nervous flyers. Cade was watching the small drama on the tarmac, perhaps sensing the delay. As Cassian watched, Holden offered a brief, reassuring smile, the kind he always gave. But tonight, it was wrong. The smile was half a beat too slow, a fraction too tight at the corners. It was the expression of a man performing a role he had suddenly forgotten the lines to. Cassian turned back to the steps. "We're grounded," he announced. 10 minutes. Modric looked confused, rain dripping from his chin. "Sir, the New Avalon meeting—" "The meeting will wait. Get Sky Harbor Internal Review on the line." Sky Harbor Internal Review was a private, fictional entity that answered to the airport's biggest clients, and Cassian was the biggest. "I want a full sweep of the Aegis. Now." He turned back to the janitor. "You come with..." But she was gone. In the moment he had turned to issue the order, in the confusion of the sudden change of plans, she had slipped from the guard's grasp. The tarmac lights flickered, a sudden dip in power casting the runway into momentary, strobe-lit chaos. When they stabilized, the reflective vest and the trash cart had vanished into the oppressive darkness of the service tunnels. Maria Ortiz had evaporated as if she were never there, leaving only the scent of chemicals and a terrifying question hanging in the air. Who was she? The internal review team, already on site for a different matter, arrived within minutes. They were efficient, crawling over the aircraft with scanners and thermal imagers. "Nothing, Mr. Vale," the supervisor reported, his suit jacket already soaked. "No unauthorized devices, no explosives, no compromised systems. The fuel lines are clean." Cassian stood under the wing, unmoved, the rain dripping from his hair. "Look again." "Sir, we have..." "Look again." A junior technician, perhaps eager to impress or perhaps just thorough, was the one who found it. He was checking the paneling on the underside of the left wing, near the fuel tank access. "Boss," the tech called out, his voice tight, "this is strange." He pointed with a mag light illuminating a single screw head. "This panel screw, it's reverse threaded. It looks secure. It passed the visual, but it's seated wrong." The supervisor paled. "It's a maintenance marker," he breathed. "But we didn't schedule maintenance." Cassian knew what it meant. A reverse-threaded screw was not just a signal. It was a point of structural weakness, deliberately introduced, designed to fail under the specific atmospheric pressure and vibration of altitude. Sabotage, subtle and deadly. Cassian stepped out from under the wing, his face carved from ice. "The flight is canceled." Holden Cade was already descending the stairs, his face a perfect mask of professional concern. "Mr. Vale, is there a technical issue? The FMS is green across the board." Cassian looked at the man he had trusted with his life for 3 years. Holden met his gaze, but not before Cassian caught the almost imperceptible bob of his throat as he swallowed, a dry, rasping movement. "A technical issue," what Holden said, his voice gaining a slightly strained confidence as he slipped into jargon. "Perhaps a sensor miscalibration in the fuel feed. We can cycle the avionics. Should only take 20 minutes. "We are done for the night, Mr. Cade." Cassian cut him off. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the relentless rhythm of the storm. Holden nodded, the perfect, disappointed employee, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the handle of his flight bag. Cassian turned to Modric, his voice dropping to the level Maria had used, the level that demanded absolute, silent obedience. "Find the janitor. I want to know everything she ate for breakfast, and do it quietly." The penthouse was a glass box suspended above Seabright City, the storm now a distant, glittering web of lights below. Cassian Vale did not go home. He went to his office. A fortress of steel and quiet that served as the brain of the Vale Consortium. The aborted trip to New Avalon was more than an inconvenience. It was a move on a chessboard he had been meticulously arranging. The deal with the Fort Meridian Infrastructure Fund was his keystone, the final, massive block that would wall off his family's past revenues, washing them clean through legitimate channels. But legitimacy had its own predators. His primary rival was not the old families he had suppressed, but a silent, corporate entity known as the Azimuth Circle. They were a secret society of the elite, moving not with guns but with leveraged buyouts and political influence. Their goal was total control of the Port Halcyon waterways, the main artery for all shipping on the coast, and Cassian's new clean enterprise was in their way. On his desk, under a single focused beam of light, lay a classified briefing. It was a security report from a fictional, shadowy agency, the FBI. The report, which had arrived only last week, warned of a third entity with unknown motives systematically infiltrating private aviation services and support staff. At the time, he had dismissed it as bureaucratic paranoia. Now, it felt like a prophecy. He looked at the file Modric had just compiled on Holden Cade. On paper, Cade was the perfect pilot. He had previously flown for a charter company called Orion Wings. A quick check by Cassian's team revealed Orion Wings had, 3 months ago, become the exclusive strategic transport partner for Fort Meridian. Cade's file was pristine, glowing with commendations, but it lacked the usual grit of a seasoned flyer. There were no minor write-ups, no logged diversions for weather, no last-minute maintenance issues. It was a record that was beautiful, and therefore entirely unnatural. It was a file that had been curated, not earned. But Cade was a symptom, not the disease. The root of the night's revelation was the janitor. Cassian closed his eyes, recalling the moment on the tarmac. He remembered her eyes. They were not the eyes of a frightened employee or a simple whistleblower. They were the eyes of someone who had stood in the wreckage of a similar disaster. Someone who had seen the mechanics of death up close and survived. He had seen that look before, in the mirror, after his father's funeral. He picked up his secure line, dialing a single number. Kellen. Kellen Thorne was Cassian's technical wizard, a man who lived in the digital and mechanical guts of the consortium. "You're not in New Avalon," Kellen's voice came through, clipped and fast, "which means the problem is real." "The problem is a reverse-threaded screw on the Aegis," Cassian said, no emotion in his voice. "I want to know every part replaced, every tool signed out, and every diagnostic run on that jet in the last 72 hours. Cross-reference it with every vendor." "Running it," Kellen said. There was a rapid clatter of keys. 3 days ago, a standard avionics diagnostic, logged by Cade. He flagged a sensor on the fuel feed. A replacement was overnighted from a new supplier, Lyra Parts LLC. "I have never heard of them," Cassian said. "Neither have I, which is the interesting part," Kellen replied. "They're a shell, incorporated 6 months ago. The address is a post office box in Wilmington, but the routing number for the payment, that routes back to a bank known to be used by the Maritime Securities Commission." The Maritime Securities Commission, another fictional name for a very real threat. The commission was the supposed regulatory body for Port Halcyon, but everyone in the know understood it was the financial enforcement arm of the Azimuth Circle. The trap was closing. The screw was not the primary attack, it was the backup, the physical evidence of a deeper, digital-first assault. As if summoned by the thought, Cassian's private, encrypted phone vibrated on the desk, a single, anonymous message. It contained no text, only a high-resolution image. It was a photograph of a screen, displaying an alternate flight plan for the Aegis 9. His intended route was plotted, but a secondary ghost route was overlaid, showing a deviation over the ocean. A single red circle marked a coordinate. Beneath it, a caption, "Remote collision point, 9,000 meters." "Kellen," Cassian said, his voice dropping, "they were not trying to make the wing fall off. They were trying to take control." Another minute of furious typing. "My God," Kellen breathed. "They were the part from Lyra." It wasn't just a sensor, it was a Trojan horse, a hardline access point to the flight management system. They couldn't hack the FMS from the outside, so they put a back door on the inside. But Cade's diagnostic, the smell? "A distraction," Kellen said, the pieces fitting together. "The scent poison maintenance card, that's old-school tradecraft. They use the false ethyl mercaptan, smell the natural gas scent to draw all our attention to a physical fuel leak. While we were chasing the smell, Cade was using the poison card to upload the ghost flight plan directly into the FMS, bypassing all our security. If that failed, the screw would do the job later." The full picture materialized in Cassian's mind, cold and brutal. The Fort Meridian deal was not just about washing money, it was a dependency trap. The deal would force him to use their shipping network, Orionet, The one run by Orion Wings, the one controlled by Fort Meridian's partners, and the silent partner behind it all, the one pulling every string, was the Azimuth Circle. If he had taken off, he would have vanished at 9,000 meters. The Veil Consortium would fracture. In the ensuing chaos, Azimuth would seize his assets, absorb his territory, and gain complete control of Port Halcyon. His death would be ruled a tragic, unexplainable accident. His entire empire had been saved by a janitor who was now a loose end his enemies would be desperate to tie off, especially if they suspected their plan had been compromised. He looked at Modric, who had been standing by the door, listening. "She is still in the airport," Cassian stated. "They do not know I am onto them yet. They think a simple mechanical fault grounded me. They will not be looking for her. Not yet. We have to find her first." The security footage was a digital ghost. Modric Poe, Cassian's right hand, traced the feed from his own terminal, his voice a low growl in Cassian's ear. "She entered Maintenance Bay D12, sir. Standard janitorial access. Then the feed loops for exactly 2 minutes. When it resumes, she's gone. She didn't come back out the main door. She used a sub-level service exit, a blind spot." Cassian was already moving. He had shed his suit jacket, soaked and heavy, and was now walking the sterile, pressurized corridors of the airport's private wing. He grabbed a high-visibility vest from an emergency station, pulling the Sky Harbor Authority nylon over his white shirt. He was no longer the CEO. He was a hunter. He did not head for the main bay. He followed the scent. The air in the service tunnels was a chemical cocktail of recycled oxygen, ozone, and grease, but Cassian's focus was singular. He was following the faint, sharp tang of the specific industrial cleaner she had used, the one that smelled like her warning. It was a trail of breadcrumbs meant for a bloodhound. The scent led him down 2 levels, away from the polished chrome and into the functional, painted cinder block heart of the airport. He found her in a small, windowless staff break room, lit by the unforgiving flicker of a single fluorescent tube. Mireya Ortiz was not hiding, and she was not running. She was sitting at a chipped Formica table, alone, meticulously repairing a pair of thick, rubberized work gloves. The palm of one was split. She was stitching it shut with a small needle and a length of translucent, heavy-gauge fishing line. Her movements economical and precise. It was the careful, patient work of someone who salvaged things, someone who knew how to make things hold. He filled the doorway. She did not jump. Her hands merely stopped their work. She looked up, and her eyes, just as calm as they had been on the tarmac, met his. The stillness was unnerving. "You should be gone," Cassian said, stepping inside. The room was small, barely large enough for the 2 of them, and the smell of stale coffee. "They are looking for a janitor who got scared," she replied, her voice low and even. "They are not looking for the woman who stayed to finish her shift." She tied off the fishing line with a practiced, tight knot. "Who are you?" She finally dropped the gloves, the repaired one landing with a solid thud. "I told you. I smell lies." She stood, but she did not retreat. "I was an aviation safety investigator, North Shore Directorate, Airframe Integrity Division. It was my job to find the flaw in the metal before it failed at 30,000 feet. I was good at it." Cassian crossed his arms, leaning against the wall. The skepticism was plain on his face, but he was intrigued. An investigator cleaning toilets. "A good place to hide," she countered, "and a better place to listen." "Prove it," Cassian challenged, his voice dropping. "If you wanted to fake a fuel leak, a scent-based diversion like tonight, but as a secondary layer, what are the 3 most common ways to mask the primary sabotage?" Mireya looked at him as if he were a particularly slow student. "Amateur hour," she said with a hint of disdain. "One, you'd trigger a false positive on the FMS using a compromised sensor tag, making the computer see a leak that is not there. 2, you'd use a low viscosity, high evaporation fluid near the T-junction. It mimics the smell, triggers the ground crew's alarms, but evaporates before a full diagnostic. 3. You'd use a dyed water solution to contaminate the sump drain sensors, forcing a manual flush-out that takes hours. She paused, holding his gaze. That's 3. But that's not what they did, is it? You would not be here if it were that simple. She took a step closer, the fishing line still in her hand. A professional would do something else. They would use a sonic resonator to create a microfracture vibration in the pressure seals. It throws a warning that vanishes the moment the engines are cold. Or, she let the word hang in the air. They would do exactly what they did tonight. They'd use the ethyl mercaptan to distract your ground crew, while the pilot, the man you trust, uses a poisoned maintenance card to upload a ghost flight plan directly into the system, bypassing all remote security. That's 2 more. A cold, heavy respect settled in Cassian's chest. She had just described his entire night, including the parts he had only learned from Kellen. Before he could respond, his secure phone vibrated in his pocket, a single, urgent buzz. He pulled it out, keeping his eyes on her. The screen lit up with a single-word header from his security chief, brief. The message was short. Holden Cade just requested a 20-minute personal leave, cited a sick mother. He's moving toward the South employee exit. He's running, Cassian said, the words a flat statement. Of course, Maria said. The inspection found the screw. He knows the plan is burned. She looked at him, her gaze suddenly intense. Analytical. Your organization is compromised. Your pilot, your jet. You are thinking about your inner circle right now. Who else knew the schedule? Who else had access? My people are loyal, Cassian bit out, the defense sounding weak even to him. Loyalty is just a type of pressure seal, she said softly. It holds until it does not. You need to split your trusted team. Right now. Send 1 man to secure the physical hangar and another to pull the electronic access logs for the last 12 hours. Do not let them communicate. Cross-check their reports. See who gives you the truth, and see who gives you the convenient answer. He stared at her. It was ruthless, efficient, and exactly the order he should have given. In that moment, the sterile break room felt like a war room, an alliance, unspoken and heavy, settled between them. You cannot stay here, Cassian said. His decision made. When Cade's exit is noted, they will review every second of footage from this airport. They will find you. He pushed off the wall and moved to the door, then turned back. My car is in the executive garage, armored. Come with me. I need you to tell me everything. For the first time, he saw her hesitate. Her certainty wavered. She looked past him, at the closed door. As if weighing the world, she knew the shadows, the chemicals, the fishing line against the one he was offering. She looked at the rain-soaked vest he wore, a cheap disguise over an expensive shirt. She was weighing one danger against another. After a long moment, she looked at the rain, visible only as a dark patch on the concrete through a greasy stairwell window, and then she gave a single, very slight nod. The armored Escalade was a sensory deprivation chamber, gliding through the service tunnels. The only sound was the heavy, rhythmic thump of the industrial wipers sweeping the rain from the windshield. They sat in the back. The space was vast, designed for 4, but the few feet of plush carpet between them felt charged, electric. Cassian could smell her the faint, sharp scent of the industrial cleaner, the ozone from the rainy air, and the simple, warm scent of her skin. He watched her profile in the dim glow of the city lights filtering through the tinted glass. She spoke first, her voice quiet, not looking at him. I have a condition. Cassian turned his head. Name it. I will help you. I'll tell you what I know about the North Shore Directorate and the shadows that hide in the maintenance logs. She turned to face him, her dark eyes catching the passing lights. But you have to promise me one thing. What? You stay grounded. Not just tonight. They will try again. They will fix the problem. They will tell you the threat is gone. They will assure you it is safe to fly. It will not be. I need your word, Mr. Vale. You do not get on that plane, or any plane until I say so. It was not a request. It was an ultimatum, delivered by a janitor to a king. Cassian looked at her, at the absolute certainty in her gaze. She was not asking him to be safe. She was asking him to be smart. "You have my word," Cassian said. The tension in the car did not break. It simply shifted, twisting into the low, dangerous thrum of a shared purpose. The silence in the armored Escalade was heavy, thick with the unspoken, broken only by the rhythmic slap of the wipers against the glass. Cassian watched the rain-slicked city streets blur past, the fortress of his car providing a sterile bubble. He turned his full attention to the woman beside him, the janitor who had saved his life. "They killed my partner," Maria said, her voice flat, devoid of the emotion the words demanded. It made them land with even more force. She was not looking at Cassian, but at her own hands, clasped tightly in her lap, the repaired glove sitting beside her. "That is why I clean floors, and that is why I knew about your pilot." Cassian waited. He was a man who understood that silence was a tool, and this woman had earned the right to use it. "It was 2 years ago," she began, her gaze fixed on the passing darkness. "I was a lead investigator for the North Shore Directorate. We handled a crash at Ridgefall. A private charter, a G5, went down in the mountains. The entire board of a competing shipping firm wiped out. The official report, signed off in 48 hours, blamed pilot error and severe icing." "You did not agree," Cassian stated. A dry, bitter sound, not quite a laugh, escaped her. "I was the one who crawled inside the wreckage. The data recorder was damaged, but the fuel assembly, it was wrong. It was not a leak. It was not icing." Her hands tightened. It was resonance. Someone had modified the fuel valve assembly. They did not plant a bomb. They planted a frequency. They had tuned it so that at a specific altitude and engine output, the valve itself would vibrate at a harmonic frequency, a vibration so high and so specific it would fatigue the metal. It was designed to create a catastrophic failure, a structural collapse, and be completely untraceable after impact. It was murder, passed off as an act of God. "You reported it." "I filed the report. I named the parts supplier. I flagged the impossible failure signatures. I told my superior, my partner, Ben. He was the only one who co-signed. He believed me." Her voice finally cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but she pushed through it. 2 days later, Ben was killed, a hit and run. The police called it a drunk driver. They never caught him. "And you?" Cassian asked, his voice low. "Me, I was discredited. They brought me up on a formal review. They said I had fabricated evidence, that I was obsessed, that I had violated a dozen procedural errors. They buried me in paperwork and ruined my credentials. They made me toxic. No one in aviation would hire me, not even to change a tire. So I vanished." The North Shore Directorate covered it up. "They did more than that," she said, finally turning to look at him, her eyes burning in the dim light. "They used it. A month after I was fired, the Directorate announced a new safety privatization initiative. They used the Ridgefall crash as proof that the state system was failing. They outsourced all safety and maintenance inspections for private and charter aviation." To whom? A brand new consulting firm, a shell. The money, the real power, came from the Maritime Securities Commission. The name hit Cassian like a physical blow. The MSC, the same fictional regulatory body Kellen had just linked to Lyra Parts, the company that had supplied the Trojan horse sensor for his own jet. "And just like that," Maria continued, her voice laced with ice, "the Azimuth Circle appeared. They became the primary safety sponsor for the new private inspection regime. They poured millions into Sky Harbor and 4 other private fields, funding advanced security protocols. In exchange, they got access to flight manifests, access to maintenance schedules, access to the supply chain. They were not buying safety. They were buying the power to choose who flew and who did not. I have been chasing these ghosts for 2 years, but I could not prove the connection. Not until tonight." The smell, Cashin said. "The Ethel Mercaptan." It was their signature, and she confirmed. The exact same anomalous scent report was logged in the maintenance files for the Ridgefall jet, just hours before it took off. It is their distraction, their calling card. When I smelled it on your tarmac, I knew. You have been hiding as a janitor ever since. It is the best place to be invisible when she said simply, "No one sees the cleaning crew, but we see everything. We clean the offices of the people who grounded me. We hear the conversations they think are private. We see the documents they leave on their desks." She reached into the pocket of her worn trousers and pulled out a tiny, black memory card, holding it between her thumb and forefinger. "I have not been just hiding. Mr. Vale, I have been hunting. I move between all 5 airfields in this region. I have been sending data to an underground network. We call ourselves the Beacon Line, whistleblowers, ex-investigators like me. We are building a case that cannot be buried." "Who is their operative at Sky Harbor who controls the operation?" "The jailer," Maria said, the name sharp. "Seraphine Dax. She's the airport's operations manager. She looks like she belongs on a magazine cover, but she is the one who controls every maintenance contract, every security pass, every cleaning crew. She is the one who cleans house. Anyone who gets too close, anyone who asks too many questions, they get scrubbed. Like Ben, she is Azimuth's woman on the inside." She held the memory card out to him. "This is my insurance. My real report. It is a scent log, a detailed day-by-day record of every chemical variation of mercaptan I have smelled at all 5 airports for the last 3 months, cross-referenced with flight plans and subsequent mechanical failures. Your name, your jet. It is the last entry." Cassian took the card. It was warm from her hand, and it felt heavier than his entire company. The full, cold and brutal scope of the plan settled over him. "My flight tonight," he said, thinking aloud, connecting her information to his own. "It coincides with a secret, unscheduled board meeting at Fort Meridian, a panic meeting. If I had met with an accident on the way..." "Your organization would be decapitated," Maria finished, her voice flat and certain. "Your death would trigger a clause in the merger. Your stocks would crash, and in the chaos, the Vale Consortium would fracture. And Azimuth would be there to buy the pieces," Cassian concluded, the words tasting like acid. "They would absorb my territory, take Port Halcyon, and my murder would be just another tragic footnote in the financial news." He looked at her, at this woman who had just handed him the key to his own survival. "They will not stop. They will find another way." "They will," she agreed. "They think a simple mechanical fault stopped you tonight. They will be angry, but they will be patient. Seraphine will ensure Cade is either silenced or replaced. The maintenance crew will find the problem and declare the Aegis safe. They will expect you to be impatient, desperate to save your deal. They will expect you to fly tomorrow." "And I will be," Cassian said, his eyes hardening. "No." Maria leaned closer, the space between them shrinking, charged with a new, dangerous energy. "You will play the part, but you are going to change the stage. They expect you to be the passenger, the victim. It is time to be the one pulling the strings." Cassian looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw the fire behind the exhaustion, the sharp, analytical mind that had survived being broken and had come back stronger. He saw an intelligence and a grit that matched his own. She was not just a survivor, she was a fighter, and she was not afraid to get her hands dirty with the truth. It was a quality he had not encountered in a long time. It was a quality he admired more than anything. "Tell me," Cassian said, his voice a low, interested rumble. "How do we change the stage?" The plan was named Hollow Wings. They did not have the luxury of time. They had the currency of desperation and the mind of Maria Ortiz. The strategy was simple in its audacity. The real Aegis 9, Cassian's jet, would remain in its hangar, its ignition systems completely, physically disconnected by Kellen Thorne, a different Aegis 9, a hollowed-out, decommissioned fuselage shell that was kept for parts and mapping, would be towed to the tarmac. From a secure room deep in the hangar, Kellen Thorne, a man fueled by caffeine and pure genius, built what he gleefully called a ghost ATC. It was a sophisticated spoofer, a black box that would intercept the airport's transponder signals. When the decoy was towed, this box would broadcast a perfect ghost image to civilian radar, showing the Aegis 9 taking off, climbing, and banking precisely along its doomed, pre-programmed flight path. It would fool everyone on the ground, and more importantly, it would fool Azimuth. Maria, in the meantime, had activated her own network. She called them Union 47, a quiet, invisible web of janitors, baggage handlers, and overlooked service staff she had cultivated for 2 years. They were the ones who saw everything. Within an hour, 3 members of Union 47, now clad in stolen maintenance coveralls, were swarming the decoy shell. They were not fixing it, they were prepping it, following Maria's instructions. They replaced a dozen key rivets on the wing panel with breakaway markers, fakes designed to shear off and provide clear evidence of tampering, but only when they were ready. Cashin's role was public. He was to be the man who had lost his patience. He returned to Sky Harbor East not as a hunter, but as a tyrant. He stormed through the private terminal, his voice, usually a controlled rumble, now a public display of aristocratic rage. "I do not care about your censor," he bellowed at a terrified terminal manager. "My deal in New Avalon is worth more than this entire airport. I am flying tonight." He found Holden Cade, who had been located after his failed escape and was now sitting in a crew lounge, feigning exhaustion. Cassian grabbed him by the front of his pilot's uniform, slamming him against the wall, a performance of violence that felt sickeningly real. "You work for me. You will get in that cockpit and you will fly me where I tell you, or I will end you." Sky Harbor security watched, appalled but intimidated. This was Cassian Vale losing control. This was exactly what Seraphine Dax would have expected. Cassian knew she was watching from her office in the main tower, a smug smile on her face as her victim walked willingly into the trap. But Cassian was not her victim. He was a puppet on a different string. In his ear, a tiny, flesh-colored device fed him the calm, steady voice of Maria. She was hidden in a darkened observation booth overlooking the hangar and the tarmac, a ghost in his own machine. "Seraphine is on the line with the tower chief," Maria whispered. "She is enjoying the show. The maintenance crew has cleared the Aegis. They found the reverse screw, blamed a tired tech, and signed off. They are towing the decoy to the tarmac now. You are green to move." "Holden is on his way to the plane," Maria's voice continued, a calm counterpoint to the storm in his head. "They are all watching you. Cassian, they are waiting for you to climb those stairs." "And when I do not," he murmured, too low for anyone to hear, "that is when the real show starts. Wait for the signal. Hush 2. That is when Kellen's spoofer is active and the tower's local radar is blind. Wait for Hush 2. Then move." He trusted her, implicitly. He walked toward the gleaming jet, the rain still falling, the scene a perfect recreation of the night before. His men, Modric included, looked tense, believing this to be the height of recklessness. He put his foot on the stair, and then the trap sprang, but not the one he expected. "Mr. Vale?" A new, iron-hard voice cut through the air. A team of men in dark, official-looking windbreakers emerged from the side of the terminal. They were not airport security. Their jackets read, "FBI, the FBI." "Mr. Vale," their leader said, a man with a face like a closed fist. "We have an anonymous tip regarding a threat to this aircraft. We are grounding all your assets pending a full security review." Cassian froze. This was a legal cage, Seraphine's plan. If he resisted, he would be arrested. If he complied, he would be detained, his reputation ruined, and Azimuth would win by default. It was brilliant. "Hush, 2 is active," Maria's voice hissed in his ear, urgent. "But the feed is scrambled. They are blocking her. Stall them." "I am Inspector Ortiz," a new voice said, this one clear and loud. Maria stepped out of the shadows of the maintenance bay. Not in her janitor's uniform, but in a crisp white shirt and a Sky Harbor Authority vest she must have stolen. She held up a freshly laminated, blinking in its newness ID card. "I am the Sky Harbor Authority temporary inspector for this incident. This is a secured maintenance zone under my authority. Your jurisdiction ends at the terminal door until I clear this site." The FBI agent stared, thrown. "I've never heard of a temporary inspector." "Then you are not very good at your job," Maria shot back, her voice sharp. "This aircraft is not secure, but it is not a bomb. It is a maintenance failure, and you are contaminating my investigation." The bluff, so audacious, so complete, gave everyone pause in that moment of absolute, heart-stopping tension. Holden Cade, seeing his one chance, scrambled up the stairs and into the cockpit of the decoy. "He is in," Cashin murmured. "I see him," Maria replied, her eyes locked on the FBI agent. Holden, desperate to complete his mission, throttled the engines. Kellen, in his brilliance, had wired the decoy's sound system to the engine controls. The sound of two massive engines spooling up roared across the tarmac, though not a single turbine blade was moving. The Aegis 9 began to taxi. "He is on the move," Maria said. The decoy, pulled by a hidden, high-speed tow bar, rolled onto the runway. Then, the second layer of the plan revealed itself. From the cockpit, Holden was not just flying, he was on a private radio frequency. "Target is not on board," he snapped, his voice now cold, efficient, and broadcast by Kellen to Cassian's earpiece. "The ground asset failed. Activate the secondary. I will clear the path." Cassian's blood ran cold. He and Maria turned to each other in the same instant, the realization hitting them both. This was not just about him. This was bigger. Holden was not just a pilot, he was a coordinator, and his backup plan was now in motion. Chaos erupted. The FBI agents, realizing they had been tricked, began shouting. Drawing weapons, the decoy jet's lights raced down the runway, and Kellen's spoofer lit up the radar screens in the main tower. In the confusion, Maria and Cassian were alone, a small island of calm in the storm. She moved close, her shoulder pressing against his, so she could speak into his earpiece microphone, her breath warm against his ear. "They have a second target. Here. Tonight. Holden is not running, he is providing a distraction." "He knew we might switch the plane," Cassian whispered back, his body thrumming with adrenaline, with her proximity. This was not a failure. This was a gambit. He looked down at her. The rain, the flashing blue lights, the shouting men, all of it fading until only her steady, intelligent eyes remained. "I am here," he said, the words a vow. "They do not get to win." She nodded. "Not as an employee, but as a partner. Then let us find out what they are really after." The chaos on the tarmac was a symphony of flashing lights and confused, shouting men. The FBI agents, realizing they had been duped by Maria's audacious bluff, were attempting to regain control, their authority dissolving in the rain. "The decoy is moving," Maria's voice was sharp in Cashin's ear, cutting through the noise. "Kellen has it on the ghost track, but that is not the threat. Look, Sector 4, the auxiliary runway." Cashin's gaze snapped from the confused agents to the far side of the airfield, a massive fuel tanker. Its silver flanks emblazoned with the logo Halcyon 12 was moving. It was not heading to a refueling station. It was pulling slowly, deliberately, onto the center of the auxiliary runway, the airport's only other viable strip, forming a perfect impassable blockade. "Holden's backup," Cassian said, the realization hitting him. "It is not just a blockade," Maria said, her voice tight with a new, sudden understanding. She was already moving, pulling him away from the FBI agents and toward a Sky Harbor Technical Services cart parked nearby. The wind shifted, carrying a new scent with the rain. Maria stopped dead. She tilted her head, sniffing the air like a bloodhound. "No, oh, no, it is not just Jeddah. I smell chlorine, a high oxidizer. It is unstable." She looked at him, her eyes wide with the terrible comprehension. "It is not a blockade. It is a bomb, a massive one." Holden is not just distracting, he is corralling. "Modric, handle the feds!" Cassian roared over his shoulder, shoving Maria toward the electric cart. "Get in. Get us to that tanker." "You drive," Maria said, grabbing a heavy canvas toolkit from the cart's flatbed. "I climb." Cassian did not waste a second to argue. He slammed his foot on the accelerator, the electric cart whining in protest as it shot forward, its tires slipping on the wet tarmac. He cut a sharp angle toward the Halcyon 12, which was still positioning itself. The tanker driver saw them coming, a small, insignificant gnat approaching a giant, and accelerated, trying to reach the runway's midpoint. "Hold on!" Cassian yelled. He wrenched the wheel, pushing the small vehicle into a controlled slide. The cart slammed, metal screaming into the massive front tire of the tanker. A desperate, sacrificial move. The impact shuddered up Cassian's arms, but it worked. The tanker, its steering compromised, hissed to a halt. Before the cart had even stopped shuddering, Maria was out. She was at the side of the tanker, scaling the maintenance ladder bolted to its flank. Her movements fluid and economical, disappearing into the rain and darkness. From the cart, Cassian saw the tanker's cab door burst open. The driver jumped out and sprinted into the night, disappearing toward the Orion Wings hangar. At the same moment, Cassian saw a second figure break from the chaos near the terminal. Holden Cade, the pilot, had used the tanker standoff as his own distraction. He was running, not toward an exit, but back toward the hangars, specifically the one marked Orion Wings. "Maria," Cassian yelled, seeing her silhouette reach the top of the tanker. "He is running." "Go," her voice came back, thin and carried by the wind. "I have this." Cassian did not hesitate. He trusted her. He broke into a dead sprint, his long legs eating up the ground, his body fueled by a cold, precise rage. Holden was fast, but Cassian was faster. He caught up to him in the long, glass-enclosed skywalk that connected the private terminals to the Orion Wings maintenance bay. The rain hammered the glass roof and walls, the noise deafening, turning the corridor into a disorienting, echoing drum. Holden reached the far door and was fumbling with a key card when Cassian hit him like a linebacker, slamming him against the glass. The entire wall shuddered, the sound a low boom that vibrated through the floor. Holden was not just a pilot, he was trained. He spun out of the grip, dropping low, and something glinted in his hand, a maintenance knife, a short, curved blade designed for stripping heavy-gauge wire. He lunged, a vicious, upward arc. Cassian twisted, but the blade was sharp. It caught him on the outside of his forearm, carving a short, deep gash. A flare of white-hot pain shot up his arm. He ignored it. He used Holden's forward momentum, grabbing the pilot's wrist and twisting, applying a vicious pressure lock he had learned from Modric. Holden screamed but did not drop the knife. He swung his body, using his weight to break the grip, and came at Cassian again, wild-eyed. "She was never gonna let you fly," Holden spat, his face a mask of desperation. "This was all for nothing." He lunged again, a sloppy, desperate move. Cassian was ready. He ducked under the wild swing, stepped inside Holden's reach, and seized the pilot's arm. He put his shoulder into the man's chest, twisting and dropping his full weight. It was a perfect shoulder lock, a move designed to disarm and disable. There was a wet, sickening pop. Holden screamed, a high-pitched sound of pure agony. The knife clattered to the floor. He collapsed, clutching his ruined shoulder, his arm hanging at an impossible angle. Cassian stood over him, breathing heavily, the rain beating a frantic rhythm on the glass. He kicked the knife away. "Who gave the order?" Cassian demanded. "Seraphine?" Holden looked up, his face a mask of pain and, strangely, amusement. He started to laugh, a wheezing, broken sound. "You think you won?" he gasped, spitting blood onto the polished floor. "You think this was about you? You think you are the center of the board?" He winced, then smiled, a terrifying, bloody expression. "You stopped a firecracker. Vale, you did not even see the real bomb. I am just Plan B. I was just a distraction. You should be looking closer to home. He inhaled a ragged, painful breath. Plan A? Plan A is already inside your empire. The words hit Cassian harder than the knife. Inside your empire. A traitor. The pain in his arm was a dull throb, completely eclipsed by the new Arctic cold spreading through his chest. On top of the tanker, Maria was fighting her own battle. Lying flat on the curved metal, the rain pounding her back, she had found the device. It was taped securely to the main pressure release valve, a gray block with a wire running deep into the mechanism. A remote-detonated electrical charge designed to ignite the volatile, chlorine-spiked fuel. She ripped open the toolkit, her fingers, numb with cold, finding the heavy, rubber-handled insulated pliers. As she closed in on the device, a small LED on it flashed red. It was armed. They are watching, she thought. They know he failed, somewhere. Seraphine Dax had just given the order to blow the fail-safe. Her hands were shaking, the rain mixing with the cold sweat on her face. Steady. She thought of Ben, of the wreckage at Ridgefall. Steady. She clamped the pliers onto the primary wire, ignoring the instinct to pull away, and squeezed. The metal bit through the insulation. A bright blue spark snapped harmlessly against the thick rubber grip, and the red light died. She was drenched, gasping, but her hand had not slipped. Alarms were blaring across the tarmac now. She climbed down the ladder, her legs weak. The driver was gone. The cab was locked. She did not hesitate. She smashed the side window with the pliers, reached in, and tore the ignition panel from the dash. Her hands, so steady with the bomb, were just as efficient at hot-wiring the heavy diesel engine. It roared to life. She put the massive truck in gear, with her heart hammering against her ribs to the rhythm of the warning sirens. She drove the bomb on wheels away from the terminals, past the auxiliary runway, and into a designated concrete safety quarantine zone at the far end of the airfield. As she brought it to a stop, she saw a flicker of orange from beneath the chassis. A small fire, likely from a leaking secondary line ignited by the earlier spark. She jumped from the cab, ran to the side panel, and grabbed the emergency foam extinguisher. She aimed the nozzle and smothered the small flames, the white foam hissing against the hot metal. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the rain. Then a new sound, a smattering of applause. Maria looked up. A half-dozen janitors and baggage handlers, members of her Union 47 network, were standing at the edge of the service road, watching. They had seen it all. Maria, covered in grime, rain and foam, felt a sudden, sharp sting in her eyes and pushed it down hard. She was turning back to the truck when Cassian's dark-suited security team arrived, their faces grim. He emerged from the glass corridor moments later, dragging the disabled Holden Cade by his one good arm. He shoved the pilot into the custody of his own men, not the Sky Harbor guards or the confused FBI. "Hold him in the sublevel," Cassian commanded, his voice pure ice. "He's a flight risk. Say nothing to anyone else." His men nodded and dragged Holden away. Cassian turned, wrapping his bleeding arm in his handkerchief, his face an unreadable mask. He would not give Seraphine or the FBI the satisfaction of an explanation, and he would not, under any circumstances, alert the real traitor Plan A that the hunt had just begun. The penthouse above Greywater Bay was a tomb of pressurized silence. The storm had broken, leaving the lights of Seabright City scattered across the dark water like broken glass. Cassian Vale stood at the window wall, his reflection a pale, stark silhouette against the city. The crude bandage on his forearm was a tight, throbbing reminder of how close the blade had come. Holden's words echoed in the sterile air, a poison he could not get out of his head. "Plan A is already inside your empire." He turned. In the center of the vast minimalist room, his inner circle was assembled, his war council. Kellen Thorne, his technical chief, looked like he had not slept in a week, his face illuminated by the pale blue glow of 3 linked tablets. Ivy Rook, his chief legal counsel, sat perfectly poised on a low-backed sofa, a leather-bound folio open on her lap, her pen held ready. And standing by the marble bar, his heavy arms crossed, was Modric Poe, his right hand, his enforcer, his brother in all but blood. "Holden is in the sublevel," Cassian said, his voice dangerously quiet. "He will not talk, but he laughed before they took him away. He told me Plan A was here, in this room." An electric tension seized the air. Ivy Rook's pen stopped moving. Kellen flinched, as if struck. Modric's gaze hardened, but he said nothing. Cassian ordered, "Report!" Kellen swallowed, his fingers flying across a screen. "It is bad, boss. Holden was a symptom. The real cancer is deep. Whoever Plan A is, they needed more than just access. They needed authority at 3 distinct levels, all firewalled from each other." He held up a finger. "1 access to your personal flight schedule and the Aegis 9's internal manifest. Only a handful of people see that." He held up a second. 2 access to the acquisitions and parts inventory. They had to approve the vendor, Lyra Parts, and authorize the installation of the Trojan horse sensor. That is a different department entirely. He held up a third finger, his eyes darting nervously toward Modric. "And 3 access to the full security rosters. They had to know where your men were, when the FBI was inbound, and how to create a clear escape path for Cade. That is your personal detail." Kellen looked at his screen, then at Cassian, his face sick. "Boss, I ran the access codes for all 3 protocols. The same high-level authorization was used to override the firewalls for all of them. A single digital signature." "Whose?" Cassian's voice was flat. "Dead." "Modric's," Kellen whispered. The silence that followed was absolute. Ivy Rook drew a sharp, quiet breath. Modric uncrossed his arms. He did not move, did not shout. He just stared at Cassian, his expression unreadable. "Cassian." "The logs show your codes were used," Cassian said, stepping forward. "At 4 a.m, 2 days ago, you pushed the Lyra Parts purchase through, bypassing a standard vendor review." "It is a frame," Modric finally exploded, his voice a roar that shook the glass. He took a heavy step forward. "I was not even here. I was at the new Avalon Exchange. On a secure video conference with the Fort Meridian underwriters, we were finalizing the pre-merger contingencies. You know this, I was on that call until 5 a.m. "A convenient alibi," Ivy Rook said, her voice cool and cutting. She made a neat note in her folio. "A remote meeting. Your terminal here at the penthouse would still be active. Your credentials could have been used by you or someone you gave them to." Modric turned on her. "You stay out of this. Ivy, this is family." He turned back to Cassian, his eyes pleading. "After 15 years, you are going to listen to this, to a line of code you know me." "I know the data," Cassian said, his voice agonizing. "The data says it was you." "Then the data is wrong." The argument was cut short by a sudden, jarring vibration. Not Cassian's corporate phone, but his private secure line, the one only his inner circle, and now Maria had the number for. It was not a call. It was a security alert, a silent ping from the private garage. He had left Maria in the armored Escalade with 2 of his best men, telling her to stay put, to stay safe. "Kellen," Cassian snapped. "Garage feed, P1, now." Kellen's fingers flew. The massive display wall behind the bar, usually showing market data, flickered to a grainy, high-definition feed of the private garage. The Escalade sat there, its lights off. The back door was open. "Where are my men?" Cassian demanded. Kellen switched cameras. He found them, 20 feet away near the elevator bank, lying motionless on the concrete. "Zoom in?" Cassian breathed. Kellen did. Near the open door of the Escalade, a dark stain glistened on the floor. In the middle of it sat a small, brown glass vial, the kind used for medical samples, and a wadded-up piece of cloth. "Hospital antiseptic," Cassian said, his voice hollow. It was Seraphine Dax's signature, a message of brutal efficiency. Maria was gone. As if summoned, the private phone buzzed again, this time. A text. A video file from an unknown number. Cassian tapped it. Maria's face filled the screen. She was bound to a steel chair, a gag in her mouth, a fresh cut bleeding over her eye. But her eyes were not afraid. They were burning with a furious, defiant hatred. The camera panned back. She was in a vast, cold room, steel carcasses of meat hanging from hooks in the background. A synthesized voice spoke, cold and robotic. "A bold move, Mr. Vale, but sloppy. You tried to change the stage. Now, we put it back where it belongs. The woman is at Pier Zeta, Port Halcyon. The cold storage. She is alive for now." The video feed held on Maria's defiant gaze. "You will reboard the Aegis 9 at 0600 tomorrow. Exactly as scheduled? You will fly the original flight plan. You will die as planned, and she will be released. You deviate, she pays the price. Your move." The screen went black. Ivy Rook stood up, smoothing her skirt, her composure absolute. "Cassian, this is a tragedy. Truly, but we must be logical. The Fort Meridian deal closes at 9 a.m. tomorrow. If you are not on that call, if you are missing or dead, the instability clause is triggered. Azimuth will use this distraction, to paint you as erratic, unstable. They will say you lost your mind, the board will panic, they will win." Cassian stared at the blank phone. The image of Maria's eyes burned into his mind. The woman who climbed a bomb, the woman who saw his trap and warned him. He looked at Ivy, his gaze so cold it made her flinch. "Cancel the call." "What?" she gasped. "Cancel the call with Fort Meridian," Cassian repeated, his voice a blade. "Send the wire. Burn the deal. They want me unstable. They are about to find out what unstable looks like." He looked back at the dark screen of his phone. He knew they were watching, listening, waiting. He spoke to the phone, to the void, his voice a low, terrifying promise. "Touch her again, and I will burn the entire port to the ground." "This is madness," Ivy cried, her composure finally cracking. She grabbed her briefcase. "This is professional suicide. Cassian, you are choosing a janitor. Over $1 billion merger, I cannot be a party to this. I need to go. I need to prepare the legal fallout." She did not walk. She fled, almost running to the elevator. "Boss," Kellen said, his voice a strained whisper. He had not stopped working. "Boss, the alibi. Modric's alibi." "What about it?" Cassian snapped, his focus on the door. "It is solid," Kellen said. "He was on the new Avalon Exchange server, but the access codes, the ones that framed him, I just traced the user terminal. They did not come from Modric's terminal here. They came from a different one, a remote authorization." "Whose Cassian demanded?" Kellen swallowed. It was masked. But the breach, the signal. It just left the building. When Ivy left the room, her phone sent a secure data burst, a ping, to an encrypted server. Kellen, the server. "I am in," Kellen yelled. "It is the Maritime Securities Commission. It is Ivy. She's been communicating with them for 6 months. She was Plan A. She set Modric up." The silence that returned was heavier than before. Cassian looked at Modric. The betrayal, the accusation, the pain of the last 10 minutes hung between them. Cassian did not have to say anything. His eyes, raw and full of regret, said it all. Modric simply nodded, his face grim. The apology was accepted. The brotherhood was reforged in the new fire. "She is heading to Pier Zeta," Cassian said. "She's going to meet Seraphine to clean up the mess." Modric walked to a cabinet, unlocked it, and pulled out 2 heavy tactical vests and 2 pistols. He tossed one to Cassian, who caught it without looking. "She is not the only one cleaning up a mess," Modric said, strapping the vest on. "This is not about the consortium anymore. Brother." "No," Cassian agreed, checking his weapon. "This is about our family." They walked out the door, together. The air in Pier Zeta was a frozen, metallic bite, colder than the rain-swept docks outside. It was a dead, sterile cold that smelled of steel and frost. and it hummed with the low-frequency thrum of massive refrigeration units. This was not just a cold storage warehouse, it was a fortress. Cassian and Modric moved like wraiths between the towering stacks of shipping containers, their tactical vests absorbing the dim light. "Kellen, are we live?" Cassian murmured, his voice barely a breath, the words masked by the compressor's groan. "Live and in their house," Kellen's voice replied, a tinny, digitized whisper in their earpieces. "I'm inside their security mainframe. This place is not just storage. Cassian, it is Azimuth's primary arsenal. Those containers marked fragile medical equipment. They are not diagnostic tools. They are packed with long-range microwave detonators and signal boosters. This is where they coordinate their attacks." They found her in the main processing freezer, a cavernous room where entire carcasses hung from steel hooks. Frozen solid, Maria was there, exactly as the video had shown, bound to a steel chair. Her face was pale with cold, but her eyes, when they met Cassian's in the shadows, were burning. Two women stood before her, their backs to the entrance. Ivy Rook, her posture as perfect and unyielding as ever, and Seraphine Dax, the airport manager, who held a tablet and radiated a cold, lethal authority. "He is here," Ivy said, not bothering to turn. She had been expecting them. Punctual, Cassian, it was always your most predictable and most boring virtue. Ivy turned, her face a smooth mask of legal condescension. Seraphine remained focused on her tablet, a general surveying her battlefield. "The negotiation is simple," Seraphine said, her voice clipped, not looking up. "Your little performance on the tarmac was impressive, but it ends. You will board the real Aegis 9 at 0600 tomorrow, exactly as scheduled. You will fly the original flight plan. And the accident will proceed." Ivy finished, stepping aside to put Maria on full display. "Your death will be ruled a tragic, unavoidable mechanical failure. The investigation will be clean. Your company will fracture. We will absorb it, and she," Ivy gestured dismissively at Maria, "will be released, grateful and forgotten." Cassian's gaze was locked on Maria. Her lip was split, and the cut over her eye had formed a dark, frozen crust. As Ivy spoke, Maria shifted. A tiny, agonizingly small movement against her ropes, something small and black, almost invisible, dropped from her hair and landed on the concrete floor with a sound too small to be heard. But Cassian saw it. A hairpin? It was not a plea for help. It was a signal. He had spent hours in the car, as they planned this, drilling his own security protocols into her. "They will always watch the hostage," he had told her. "Never break your restraints until you break the camera. Signal me, and I will break it for you." "Modric," Cassian whispered, his eyes never leaving Ivy. "The distraction now." Modric, who had looped around to the other side of the freezer, hefted a heavy-duty wrench from his belt. He slammed it, with the full force of his body, into a thick, insulated pipe marked with a bright yellow hazard triangle. The sound was a dull, heavy clang, followed instantly by a high-pitched, violent hiss. A cloud of white, acrid vapor billowed from the ruptured pipe. "Ammonia leak containment breach. Sector 3, one of Seraphine's guards yelled from a catwalk above. His voice panicked. The alarms, sharp and deafening, began to wail. The guards who had been focused on Maria immediately turned, their attention ripped away by the immediate, lethal threat of the chemical fog. In the confusion, Cassian slipped, unseen, into the small, glass-walled security office adjacent to the freezer. The guard had already fled. "Kellen, the feed," Cassian snapped, sliding into the chair. "Already on it," Kellen's voice shot back. "Camera 9, the one on Maria. I am locking a 5-second loop of her. Still tied. They will see her, but she will not be there. Go." "You have 90 seconds, max." On the main security display, the image of Maria remained, a perfect, motionless captive, in the real world, the actual Maria. Her hands now free, was working the hairpin into the lock of her leg restraints. The moment they fell away, she did not run. She slid, low and silent, behind a tall steel rack of frozen goods. Cassian stepped back out of the office, into the open. "You always were meticulous." "Ivy," he said, his voice calm, cutting through the wail of the alarms. Ivy and Seraphine spun around, their faces a picture of shock. The guards were scrambling, and Cassian was supposed to be a ghost. "You," Ivy gasped, her composure finally cracking. "Me," Cassian said, walking forward. "All this. Ivy, the betrayal, the frame-up on Modric, just for a seat on their board. Or were you just tired of being in my shadow? I remember your first day as an intern. So bright, so ambitious, but always so desperate to prove you were smarter than the man who hired you." "Shut up!" Ivy shrieked, her voice echoing. The taunt, the reminder of her perceived inferiority, hit its mark. But Seraphine Dax did not panic. She was not a lawyer, she was a soldier. She snarled, her eyes narrowing as she tapped her tablet. "You are a fool, Vale. You think this was the only plan? You just stepped on a landmine." She hit a final command. "Plan B is active." "Aye, boss," Kellen yelled, his voice frantic in Cassian's ear. "We have a big problem. A cargo truck just outside the pier. It is a launch platform. She just launched a salvo of drones. Armed, they are heading for the Port Halcyon fuel depot. She is going to blow the whole harbor." "Kellen, stop them!" Cassian yelled, moving toward Maria's hiding place. "I cannot stop them, but I can steer them." Kellen sounded manic, his typing an audible frenzy. "She is guiding them using the Ghost ATC frequency. But I own the Ghost ATC she is broadcasting on my turf. I am reflecting their signals, scrambling the target data. I am turning them into decoys." Outside, a series of rapid, concussive whumps shook the entire pier, rattling the steel beams. Seraphine stared at her tablet, her face ashen with disbelief. The icons for her drones were not just offline. They were listed as self-terminated. Tricked by Kellen's code, Seraphine's own drones had just targeted and destroyed their own launch vehicle. "It is over, Seraphine," Cassian said. Ivy knew it, her face contorted in a mask of pure terror. She turned and ran, bolting from the freezer, back toward the glass-enclosed walkways that connected the pier to the shore. Maria emerged from behind the rack, grabbing Cassian's arm. "She cannot escape. She is the one who signed the orders." They ran together, pounding down the metal gangway. The rain had returned, a curtain of water hammering the glass walls, making it feel like they were running inside a river. The walkway was slick with a patina of grease and diesel fuel. Maria stumbled on a patch, her feet sliding. Cassian grabbed her hand. It was not a gesture of help. It was an anchor, their fingers interlaced, a silent, locked-in promise. They ran as one, their footsteps a single, pounding rhythm. They cornered Ivy at the very end of the pier. The walkway stopped, ending in a short barrier and a sheer drop to the black, churning water 20 feet below. Ivy skidded to a halt, her expensive heels slipping and turned, her face a mask of desperate, cornered animal panic. "Cassian, wait, you do not understand," she sobbed. "Azimuth. They have everyone. They are everywhere I was, just—" She scrambled, trying to climb over the side barrier, perhaps thinking she could hide on a piling. Her foot slipped on the wet metal. With a high-pitched scream, she went over the side, her fingers catching the bottom railing, her body dangling over the void. The storm raged around her. "Cassian," she shrieked, her voice raw. "Please help me like the old days, please. Cassian." Cassian walked slowly to the edge. Maria stood beside him, her breathing ragged, her hand still locked in his. He looked down at the woman who had been his confidant for a decade. He extended his free hand, his arm outstretched, his palm open. Ivy's eyes flooded with desperate hope. She reached up. Slowly, deliberately, Cassian pulled his hand back. He folded his arms. "No," he said, his voice as cold and flat as the water below. "You chose your side." "Cassian." Her scream was ripped away by the wind as her terrified, manicured grip finally failed. She vanished into the black, churning water. A heavy clang echoed from behind them. Modric stood there, his hand on the emergency lever for the pier's blast door. He looked at the empty railing, then at Cassian, and nodded once. He pulled the lever down, and the heavy bulkhead sealed the pier. Azimuth had just lost its queen. The Driftline safe house was a small, forgotten cabin on the industrial outskirts of Seabright, smelling of old wood, sea salt, and the ever-present rain. The storm, which had been a relentless assault for 2 days, had finally reached its crescendo. It hammered the tin roof with a rhythmic, deafening roar, a private drumbeat for the 2 people inside. The single yellow-gold lamp cast a warm, contained circle of light in the dark room, illuminating the Spartan wooden bed where they sat. They were tending to the night's damage. The room was thick with the clean, sharp smell of mint-scented antiseptic, a scent that now mingled with the undeniable, warm, human smell of their skin, of adrenaline fading, of proximity. Cassian finished gently cleaning the raw, angry red rope burns on Maria's wrists. His touch was surprisingly steady, meticulous, his large hands moving with an unexpected gentleness. She had not flinched, not once. Now, it was her turn. He sat on the edge of the bed, his shirt unbuttoned, the tactical vest discarded. She was standing in front of him, finishing the new, tight bandage on his forearm where Holden's blade had carved its signature. The gash was clean, angry, but it would heal. "You need to be more careful," she murmured, her voice rough, her fingers pressing the medical tape flat. "I had it handled," he said, his voice a low rumble. "It looks like handled bled through 2 bandages," she countered, but there was no heat in it. Her hands lingered, her thumb brushing the skin just above the white gauze. The touch was electric, a simple point of contact that silenced the storm outside. She looked up, her gaze traveling from his arm to his face. She met his eyes. They were not the eyes of the ruthless CEO or the cold-blooded strategist who had just let a woman fall to her death. They were just his hard, yes, but intensely, frighteningly human. They were the eyes of the man who had seen her in the break room and, against all logic, had chosen to trust. The confession slipped out of him, ragged and unexpected, as if pulled from him by that gaze. "When I saw that video," he said, his voice barely audible over the rain, "the one from the freezer, I lost control." She frowned, confused. "You were perfect. The threat, the timing. It was a perfect tactical move." "It was not tactical," he said, his voice raw. He looked at her, and she saw a vulnerability so deep it almost brought her to her knees. "I was not thinking about the deal, or Azimuth, or even Ivy. I saw you, and the only thing I could think of was burning the world down to get you back. It was not strategy. It was rage." He shook his head, looking away, disgusted with the admission. "It was a weakness." She let go of his arm, her hands moving to cup his jaw, forcing him to look at her. Her palms were calloused from her work, warm from his skin. "When they put the gag in my mouth," she said, her own voice trembling, "I was not afraid of them. I was not afraid of Seraphine or even of dying." Her thumbs traced the hard line of his jaw. I was afraid that they would use me to break you, that I would be the reason you failed. That is the only thing I was afraid of, Cassian being your weakness." The space between them collapsed, the storm, the plan, the betrayal. It all dissolved. There was only this, the admission, the shared fear. The kiss came from both of them at once. It was not a kiss of passion, not at first. It was a kiss of collision, a desperate, fumbling confirmation that they were both still here, still breathing. It was hesitant, clumsy, a question asked in the dark. It was the taste of rain and salt and the metallic tang of fear. And then it changed. He deepened it, his hand coming up to tangle in her damp hair, and the hesitation burned away, replaced by a fire that had been building since he first saw her defy him in that sterile break room. It was a fire that had been fed by her intelligence, her courage on the tanker, her defiance in the freezer. The kiss was deep, claiming, and it left them both breathless. He pulled back, just an inch, his forehead resting against hers. His breath was ragged, his eyes closed. He was checking, asking a question his words could not form. "Is this okay?" She did not nod. She opened her eyes, and her gaze was as clear, calm, and certain as it had been on the tarmac. She gave him her answer. A small, slow smile touched her lips, a smile of pure, unadulterated wanting. "I want this," she whispered, the words a confession and a command. He kissed her again, his lips tracing a line from her mouth to the sharp, defiant angle of her jaw. His other hand went to her shoulder, his thumb brushing her collarbone, a jolt of heat passing between them. "We choose each other," he responded, the words a vow, sealing the consent, sealing the alliance. It was not a frantic, desperate coupling. It was a slow, deliberate exploration. His hand slid from her shoulder, down her back, learning the lines of her spine through the thin layer of her shirt. She unbuttoned the top buttons of his shirt, her fingers brushing the warm, solid muscle of his chest, her hands mapping him just as he was mapping her. He unbuttoned her shirt. Just enough, pushing the damp fabric aside, not to take, but to feel. The contact of his warm palm flat against the skin of her back, skin to skin, was a grounding, a solid anchor in the chaos. They found their way down onto the bed, lying side by side, the storm raging around their small, warm haven. He held her, his body a shield against the world, and she held him back, an anchor to his own humanity. For a long time, there was no sound but the rain and their slowing breath. The fire settled, not into ash, but into a deep, solid ember, a core of heat that would fuel them. "Tomorrow," she whispered against his chest, her voice no longer a victim's, but a strategist's. "Seraphine, she will be expecting you to fly." "She will be expecting the victim," he said, his hand idly tracing her shoulder blade. "But she will get the bait." "We give her the bait," Maria corrected, tilting her head back to look at him. "You, on the tarmac, playing the part. But Kellen and I, we will be in her house. We have Holden. We have his testimony. Live on a secure feed. We have the Lyra Parts invoices. We have her own drone commands from the pier. We do not just expose Azimuth. We let the FBI watch her expose herself." He looked down at her, a fierce, protective admiration in his eyes. He bent his head, his forehead touching hers. "Tomorrow morning," he promised, his voice a low, steady rumble against the roar of the storm. "We end this." The dawn at Sky Harbor East was not a sunrise. It was a wound. The sky was a bruised, weeping gray, and the storm, though no longer raging, refused to die, coating the tarmac in a treacherous, gleaming sheet of water. Cassian Vale emerged from his armored Escalade, not a single hair out of place. He was the picture of the impatient, furious billionaire, his face a mask of cold entitlement. He strode toward the Aegis 9, the hollowed-out decoy, now perfectly positioned, his long coat billowing behind him. He was the bait, and he played his part to perfection, all for an audience of one. High above the tarmac, in an auxiliary command tower with a direct view of the runway, Seraphine Dax watched. She stood in the dark, a cup of coffee steaming in her hand, her face illuminated by the green glow of a single monitoring screen. It showed a pressure-sensitive reading of the decoy's left wing, exactly where the breakaway rivets were. Her finger was poised over a small, red icon on her tablet. Her orders were simple the moment the Aegis 9's wheels left the ground. She would press that button, triggering the high-frequency charge. The flawed, compromised wing would tear itself apart, and Cassian Vale would be a memory. She was not the only one watching. On a dispatch vehicle parked just out of sight, Mireya Ortiz, now in a Sky Harbor technical vest, finished attaching a device to the wing's edge. To any observer, it looked like a final diagnostic. But the device, a high-sensitivity optical spectrometer, was live-streaming a microscopic analysis of the breakaway rivets directly to a secure server. A server that, at that very moment, A team from the FBI was monitoring. The same agents from the night before, now armed with Maria's data, were no longer a threat. They were her unwitting audience. The final piece of the trap slid into place. Holden Cade, his arm in a sling, his face a mask of pale, drugged terror, was escorted from a black van by two of Cassian's men. He was the second piece of bait. As he was marched toward the plane, he spoke, his voice a low, desperate monotone. "She is in the auxiliary tower," he mumbled, a tiny microphone in his collar broadcasting every word to Kellen. Seraphine Dax, she gave the kill order, the whole thing. Ridgefall, the Aegis. It all came from the Azimuth Circle. Ivy Rook was the one who signed the payments. She was the one who told me to leave the engineer at Ridgefall. She said he was a loose end. The confession was a live wire. As Cassian placed his foot on the air stairs, the Aegis 9's engines, Kellen's speakers roared to simulated life. The plane began to roll. Seraphine watched the aircraft pick up speed, her lips curved into a triumphant smile. Her prey was on the move. She watched him, waiting. "He is taxiing," she murmured, her thumb moving to the red icon. But the real action was happening 100 yards away, in the main Vale Consortium hangar, where the real Aegis 9 sat cold and dark. The FBI team, armed with a new, ironclad warrant, burst through the doors. They found exactly what Maria had told them they would find: not a bomb, but a sophisticated, long-range transponder, the same kind used to remotely pilot the drones at Pier Zeta, currently wired into a high-gain transmitter. The agents swarmed it, severing the cables. In the auxiliary tower, Seraphine's finger pressed down. The icon on her tablet grayed out. Command sent. On the runway, the decoy Aegis 9 continued to roll, its wing perfectly intact. Nothing happened. Seraphine stared, her smile freezing. She hit the button again and again. "Detonate. You bastard," she hissed. "Why is it not working?" A heavy clang echoed behind her, the sound of a magnetic lock engaging. She spun around. Modric Poe stood in the doorway, his massive frame blocking the only exit. He just smiled. "Signal's a little weak up here, Seraphine," he said, holding up a small, military-grade signal jammer. At the exact same moment, every news outlet in Seabright City, every terminal in the FBI headquarters, and every screen in the Sky Harbor control tower lit up with a live feed. It was not a news report. It was Kellen's masterpiece, a split screen showing Seraphine's face, frozen in panic, alongside the live, damning, audio-only feed of Holden Cade's full confession. The trap had snapped shut. On the chaotic tarmac, Ivy Rook, who had been fished from the water by an Azimuth recovery team and had been hiding among the legal observers, saw it all. She saw the raid. She saw the blank-faced FBI agents sealing the scene. She saw her name, her reputation, her entire life go up in flames. She turned and ran. She did not get 5 feet. Maria stepped out from behind a service truck, blocking her path. The rain had plastered her hair to her face. She looked exhausted, grimy, and absolutely beautiful. "You," Ivy spat, her mask of composure shredding. "You did this. You are a janitor." "I am an investigator," Maria said, her voice clear and strong over the wail of approaching sirens. "And you are a murderer. You signed the order. You left Ben to die at Ridgefall." "You have no proof!" Ivy shrieked. Ivy Rook was the one who signed the payments. Holden Cade's voice suddenly boomed, not from an earpiece, but from the airport's own public address system. Kellen, in his final flourish, had routed the confession everywhere. She was the one who told me to leave the engineer. The sound of her own betrayal, amplified for the entire world to hear, broke Ivy. Her legs gave out. She collapsed onto the wet tarmac, a single, broken sob escaping her as the FBI agents, their faces like stone, surrounded her, their handcuffs glinting in the gray light. The fallout was immediate. Azimuth was exposed, a creature of shadow dragged into the searing light. Fort Meridian, in a televised press conference, furiously cut all ties, announcing their new partnership with the Vale Consortium, citing a new, revolutionary set of safety standards being implemented. Standards advised by a previously unknown group called the Beacon Line. Cassian Vale stood on the tarmac, watching it all. He turned and looked at the decoy plane, now stopped at the end of the runway, a hollow, empty shell. He had never intended to fly. He had never been the victim. He turned and walked away from the steps, back toward the living. The whisper from a janitor, 2 nights ago, had saved his life twice, once from the trap, and once from the illusion that he was untouchable. The epilogue was written a week later, on the open-air deck of the Port Halcyon shipping office. The wind was clean, tasting of salt and new beginnings. The sun was finally shining. Cassian stood next to Maria, not as a boss, but as a partner. He held out a simple, black key card. "I cannot go back to cleaning floors," she said, looking at it. "I know," he said. He tapped the card. "The Driftline Safety Center. It is the new, independent oversight division for the entire consortium. And for Port Halcyon, it is yours. You build the team, you make the rules, you answer to no one, especially not to me." She looked at him, a slow, appraising gaze. "You know I will ground your entire fleet if I find a single reverse screw. I am counting on it." He placed the card in her hand. "From now on," he said, his voice low, "all our flights take off on a foundation of truth." Maria closed her hand around the card, her gaze drifting to the horizon, to the clear, open sky over New Avalon. "And they land," she said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. "On trust." He took her hand, the one holding the card, and their fingers interlaced. They stood there for a long time, watching the ships come in, the future unfolding before them. In the distance, from the city, they could just hear the faint sound of a police siren, a final, fading echo of the chaos they had ended, right back on the tarmac where it all began. Thank you for listening to this story. Please comment below and let us know where you are listening from. Share your thoughts and subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Story, like the video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button to help this story reach more people.